So what do President Trump's newly declassified documents actually say about threats to U.S. elections? CNN's Marshall Cohen is part of the team reviewing hundreds of pages of documents, and he's joining us right now. All right, Marshall, what are we learning?
Hey, Fred, good morning. We were going through these hundreds of pages last night while the White House was releasing these declassified documents. Look, we're journalists. We like it when the government declassifies intel reports so that we can learn what's going on behind the scenes. But with the Trump administration and with this White House, we have seen that sometimes when they put out a claim, there is a lot of context that needs to be added to give the full picture. So let me tick through three big buckets here of what we learned and what you need to know to really understand what's going on. So as Betsy just mentioned, there were vulnerabilities that the White House highlighted about voting machines and claimed that there are weaknesses that foreign adversaries could exploit. And that is what the documents do show, that there are weaknesses in the system that could be taken advantage of. But the documents do not even assert that foreign adversaries ever actually took that final step, hacked any machines, and changed any results, which is a very key distinction. Moving on to the topic of non-citizens voting in U.S. elections, which is one of the president's fixations, even though there is no evidence of it occurring on a widespread basis. The documents do discuss allegations of non-citizens on the voter rolls at a far higher number than we've already known, something to the tune of 250,000 citizens, non-citizens on the rolls in some key states. But number one, there are some issues with how that data was collected, which could lead to a lot of false positives. And the documents released last night, importantly, do not provide any evidence of illegal voting. To be clear, there's a difference. If you're on the voter roll, that doesn't mean you always go and vote. And if someone who is not supposed to be on the rolls is on the rolls, it's a very different story if they then go walk into a polling place and try to cast a ballot. There are a lot of safeguards in place to stop that from happening. Finally, Fred, on the topic of China, this was a big one. The documents do show that China over the years has obtained millions of voter records on American voters. But the context here is pretty important. Yes, the intelligence community accuses China of obtaining that through hacking and illicitly, but also a lot of those voter records are available for sale. A lot of these are public records that the states sell to anybody who wants to buy them. And importantly, the documents do not show that China actually tampered with any of those voter databases, deleting a record, manipulating a record. Yes, they have the information, but it's not clear that they actually ever did anything with it to hurt our elections. Fred?
All right, all very important distinctions. Marshall Cohen, thank you so much.
Steve Bannon. He texted CNN and he said, "We need a national security emergency about the midterm elections immediately. This is a powerful predicate for that." Derek, did you hear a powerful predicate for a national emergency around elections?
I did not. I heard things that we're very familiar with in the United States, and that should be causes for concern. We are concerned about foreign interference in our elections. We should be concerned about aging voting machines and things that need to be updated. We should be concerned if there's some evidence that there are non-citizens on the voter rolls, but at the same time, we've got lots of checks, lots of ability to update systems, lots of ability to use kind of the existing infrastructure with maybe a little extra cash from Congress to be able to sort of patch up those systems. But on the whole, many of the things do not suggest an emergency is at stake.
There are some that argue that the SAVE Act and what the president is asking for isn't about patching up a system, but replacing it. The Washington Post opinion section saying voter ID doesn't need Washington's meddling. They say the problem with the legislation is not that it tries to verify identity or citizenship. They say the problem is that it replaces every state's voting law with a national code. Do you think this is why senators have been loath to pass it?
Yeah, I think this is why people like Senator Mitch McConnell, they don't think that Washington should set a one-size-fits-all solution for elections. And people like Lisa Murkowski recognize when you say that you need proof of citizenship and you need to go to your county, place of registration and show them a birth certificate. That disadvantages the rural voters in parts of Alaska who might have registered online. So I think there's a reason why you're seeing Republican pushback. And it's, good faith disagreement about what we think the best way forward is. Should we have more federal safeguards or should we leave it to the states? And I think it's a reason why the Save America Act is probably not going to go forward.
Finally, what I heard last night is someone who does not trust his intelligence apparatus, who talked about things that were being withheld or obfuscated. Given the cuts that they've made, the changes they've made, do you think the U.S. is actually in a position to protect its elections from those agents? Will those agencies be able to protect the elections?
So I certainly hope so. We hope that with all of the focus that he gave on China last night and all of the focus on foreign interference, we want to make sure that we don't have hackers trying to infiltrate our systems.
Okay, so when a president gives a big speech, like a State of the Union address or a primetime address, there is always, and I have managed a lot of these processes, a team of young press aides frantically putting together press clips and tweets and summaries of news coverage just to show their bosses, including the president, of course, how widely and positively the speech was covered. And my bet is last night's speech proved to be a bit more challenging for the crack team over at the White House, because here's what they had to work with. The speech now did make the front page of the Washington Post this morning. You can see it on your screen right there, but really just barely. And that piece focuses on the fact that Trump didn't offer any evidence to back up his claims. And then there's the rest of the front page, which focuses on Trump's failure to renovate the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool and about how Trump's approval rating is down in the 30s. Not exactly a framer to blast out to Trump supporters, is that front page that you see on your screen right now. The LA Times jammed a mention of Trump's speech to the bottom right corner of the front page, just saying you could go to the paper's website if you wanted more info. Hey, everyone, we didn't feel like using ink here in our newspaper, but if you feel like it, you could go hunt around the website and you might find something on there. And the front page of today's New York Times didn't mention Trump's speech at all. And when you look at the coverage of Trump's favorite news source, in Trump's favorite news source of all of them, I think, that one may have prompted some tantrum throwing by the cable news loving man sitting in the Oval Office. Because after Fox News played all 27 minutes of Trump's speech, and they did, letting him make all his outrageous allegations, they quickly brought on a reporter to give this fun little disclaimer.
Fox News has not seen that evidence yet, is not in a position to evaluate the accuracy of the president's statements and claims at this time.
Okay, then. Now, to add insult to injury, Fox didn't even keep talking about the speech after that. That's pretty much it. They changed the subject almost immediately. So much for Trump's big, splashy, subject-changing, narrative-changing speech. And then this morning, Trump's personal favorite show, Fox and Friends, ignored his speech entirely. Now, Fox and Friends is a 3-hour-long show. They have a lot of time for segments on there. They had time this morning for segments about the World Cup and country music star Toby Keith and the dating app Hinge and WNBA star Caitlin Clark and the Fast and the Furious franchise, of course, which apparently still warrants a conversation. But they didn't have time for a segment about Trump's presidential address. Now, that one's gonna kind of sting. Who knows what he was doing flipping through the channel, maybe throwing remotes, we don't know. And it wasn't just the media leaving Trump hanging last night, because Trump's speech was supposed to be the moment when he finally provided bombshell evidence that our elections were somehow insecure. That was the promise, right? That the 2020 election was stolen and he was going to show us new evidence that had been withheld from him somehow, even though he had received a briefing on it. He said he was releasing newly unredacted intelligence documents to prove it all. But last night, the Washington Post reported that Trump's own CIA director, John Ratcliffe, was notably absent from Trump's intelligence-focused speech. And in the minutes after his speech, Ratcliffe posted a statement in which he said a whole lot of words, but none of those words actually backed up the allegations that Trump, his boss, made in his speech. And then after the speech, MS Now's own Von Hilliard got one of the members of Trump's own election task force, the guy who is reportedly one of the big brain conspiracy machines behind all this, to admit that the intelligence documents Trump released yesterday do not prove that any of our recent elections were rigged.
Do you acknowledge that there were no votes changed in 2020?
All I can acknowledge is what the intelligence shows, right? I only know the intelligence community has zero evidence that someone has flipped, that a foreign power flipped a vote in 2020, 22, or 24.
That's pretty clear. There we go. That's what we've all been saying for a long time. Now, the man that Vaughn was questioning there was the once conservative journalist, if you could call him that, turned conspiracy theorist John Solomon. He is maybe best known for his work trying to downplay the importance of Trump's ties to Russia, but he is now a short-term employee at the White House as part of Trump's election task force. And as MS Now reported earlier this week, he was one of the main people in charge of declassifying intelligence, because obviously he's qualified to do that, to attempt to prove Trump's allegations about elections.
The irony is that Donald Trump may have just done more than anyone else to bury the big lie. His election claims were never credible, but many supporters refuse to believe journalists, investigators, or the January 6th committee. They dismiss every piece of evidence as anti-Trump propaganda. This time, they cannot use that excuse. Trump personally went on television and told Americans to read the newly released documents. He presented them as the proof that would finally show the election was rigged. But the documents did not prove that foreign powers changed votes, hacked machines, or stole the 2020 election. They show possible vulnerabilities and security concerns, but no evidence that any election result was altered. Even a member of Trump's own election task force admitted that the intelligence community had zero evidence that a foreign power flipped votes in 2020, 2022, or 2024. That is what makes this so damaging. These were not documents released by Democrats, prosecutors, or hostile media outlets. Trump's own administration selected them, declassified them, and presented them to the public. He promised a bombshell. Instead, he released evidence that failed to support his central claim. Trump wanted these documents to revive the big lie. He may have just helped bury it.